So when you start R, you should have a screen something like this. We can go ahead and start RCmdr. Okay, so here's RCmdr. And in section or lab, you learned how to generate these random exit polls. So let's say we sample 100 people. Let's call this polynomial samples 100. Our fraction of brown votes was 0.57. We'll do 1,000 repetitions of these exit polls, and again, our sample size is 100. All right, so now in the script window, these are the commands that RCmdr actually sends to R to generate this data set. And one suggestion was that you make a new variable called fraction of brown votes. Okay, so we'll select that in the script window and submit it. Okay, the output goes down there. Now one thing is sometimes in order for RCmdr to register that you've done something, you have to do something to the data set. For example, let's say we went to graphs and tried to plot the histogram. Well, our fraction of brown votes variable just isn't there. Mean variable is there, but fraction of brown votes isn't. So we'll cancel that. And now let's just edit the data set. Okay, that's just to get our commander to realize we did something. This is the command that it uses when you hit that edit data set. Now when we go to graphs, there's fraction of brown votes. So let's plot that. Okay, so here's our histogram. Fraction of brown votes is on the x-axis, and the frequency is on the y-axis. This is frequency out of those 1,000 repetitions that we got a fraction of brown votes in this, between these, in this bin, in this bin, in this bin, in this bin. So if we wanted, say, the fraction of times we got brown votes between 0.5 and 0.55, we go up here, go over, and it's around 300. Okay, around 30% of the time we got this fraction of brown votes between 0.5 and 0.55. Okay, so sometimes we want to do a larger data set, and RCmdr will do it, but it takes a long time. So you can actually have R do it. This is your R window over here. So here's how you do that. Select this command that we use to make the data set. Copy that. We'll go over here and just paste that in. And now let's say we want to do, say, 5,000 samples. We'll still do 1,000 repetitions, but in this case we'll do 5,000. Our sample size is now 5,000. Change that. Okay, so let that go, and now you got the little caret, so now it's done. Now what we can do is we can do those other commands, basically naming the columns and the rows. So we can go back up to these lines and edit them. Okay, so we'll select that. We're renaming the row names for this, our new data set, binomial samples 5,000. Hit submit. Okay, so it did that. Now we're going to rename the column names. And we now have 5,000 columns. Oops, sorry. So we'll select that. And now we're going to calculate this fraction. All right, so it calculated those means, and we'll also make a new variable called fraction of brown votes. Okay, now one thing we could do is we could go up here and try to select this new data set. Again, this will work in RCmdr, but it'll take a long time. So instead, if we want to plot the histogram or we want to do anything with this data set, we can just type in directly the data set we're working with. So for instance, if we want to calculate the mean, we can do mean binomial samples 5,000 fraction of brown votes, and select that and hit submit, and there's our mean down there. Okay. We can also now plot that histogram, and we can use anything else for mean as well. We can also plot that histogram. This is the commands to use the histogram, to make the histogram that we used before. And instead we'll just make this 5,000. Okay. Again, we could, if we wanted to use the menu, we'd have to change this data set, and that would just take a long time. So this is a shortcut way of doing that. And you already have the commands here. All you have to do is just change which data set you're working with. It was 100. It was binomial samples 100. Now it's binomial samples 1,000. So select all of that, submit, and there you go. There's your data set. For binomial samples 1,000, the fraction of brown votes, frequency on the y-axis, and the fraction on the x-axis. Okay, so now if you that's how you generate these larger data sets using this R window, instead of just to avoid making RCmdr freeze.